In the cold, sterile world of corporate giants, where success is measured in billions and kindness is a forgotten currency, an ordinary man was about to perform an extraordinary act. He was Jose Miller, a janitor and a single father, armed with nothing but a worn-out mop and a $5 bottle of bubble solution. His audience? A little girl lost in a storm of panic, and her mother, Catalina Ellington, the formidable billionaire CEO of the very building he cleaned. Hidden behind the one-way glass of her penthouse office, she was about to witness a moment of pure, unscripted humanity that would not only save her daughter, but challenge everything she thought she knew about strength, value, and the true meaning of wealth. The lobby of Ellington Innovations Tower was less a room and more a statement. It was a cathedral of modern commerce, with floors of polished Italian marble that reflected the cold, geometric light fixtures hanging 30 feet above. The air itself smelled expensive, a sterile, faintly metallic scent that clung to the tailored suits of the people who strode purposefully across its vast expanse. For Jose Miller, it was just another floor to polish, another set of glass doors to wipe free of fingerprints. At 42, Jose's life was a world away from the one that played out in the executive suites above. His universe was a modest two-bedroom apartment, the worn photograph of his late wife, Sarah, on his nightstand, and the bright, gap-toothed smile of his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Every squeak of his cart's wheels on the marble, every swish of his mop, was a note in the quiet symphony of his devotion to her. He'd lost Sarah to cancer 3 years ago, a brutal, swift illness that had ripped the heart out of their world and left him to navigate the treacherous waters of single fatherhood alone. The night shift as a janitor wasn't glamorous, but it allowed him to be there in the mornings to make Lily pancakes and in the afternoons to help with her homework. It was a life of quiet sacrifice, and he asked for nothing more. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, the usual hushed efficiency of the lobby was shattered. The sound wasn't an alarm or a crash, but something far more piercing, the raw, unfiltered shriek of a child in distress. Jose, who was meticulously cleaning the brass plaque by the main entrance, straightened up. Near the central security desk, a small girl, no older than his Lily, was having a complete meltdown. She was a whirlwind of flailing limbs and heart-wrenching sobs, her little body rigid with overwhelming panic. Her hair, a cascade of dark curls, was damp with sweat, and her face was streaked with tears. A woman in a sharp gray pantsuit, her nanny, Jose presumed, was trying to reason with her, her voice a mixture of frantic whispers and strained patience. "Zoe, please, we have to go. Mommy is waiting," the nanny pleaded, attempting to take the girl's hand. The touch was like a lit match to gasoline. "No!" the girl, Zoe, screamed, the sound echoing unnervingly in the cavernous space. She threw herself to the floor, curling into a tight ball. "Too loud, too bright. Go away." People stopped. They stared. Men in $1,000 suits paused their phone calls, their expressions a cocktail of annoyance and pity. Women clutched their designer bags a little tighter, whispering to their companions. 2 security guards approached, their faces grim and uncertain. They were trained for threats, not for the fragile terror of a child. Jose felt a familiar pang in his chest. He'd seen this before, not with Lily, but he'd read about it in the parenting books he devoured after Sarah died. Sensory overload. The world crashing in on a little soul with too much noise, too much light, too many expectations. He saw the nanny's desperation, the guard's helplessness, and the cold judgment in the eyes of the onlookers. But most of all, he saw a terrified little girl who just needed the world to stop spinning for a second. High above, on the mezzanine level that overlooked the lobby, Catalina Ellington stood frozen. The one-way glass of her private viewing gallery was designed to let her observe the heart of her company without being seen. It was her sanctuary, her command post. But right now, it was a torture chamber. The child on the floor was her daughter Zoe, her brilliant, sensitive, and often overwhelmed Zoe. Catalina was a titan. She had taken her late husband's tech startup and forged it into a global empire. She could command a boardroom of grizzled executives with a single glance and negotiate multi-billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. But she couldn't stop her own daughter's pain. She felt a surge of hot, useless shame. Her schedule had been relentless, a series of back-to-back meetings that had run late. She'd sent her assistant to tell the nanny, Patricia, to wait in the lobby. She should have gone down herself. Now her daughter was on public display, her private struggle a spectacle for strangers. Every fiber of her being screamed to run down there, to scoop Zoe into her arms. But she knew it would only make things worse. A crowd, her own frantic energy. It would be too much. She was trapped, a queen in her castle, powerless to help her own princess. Down below, Jose made a decision. It wasn't born of strategy or a desire for recognition. It was pure instinct, the quiet voice of a father who understood that sometimes the biggest problems require the smallest, gentlest solutions. He pushed his cleaning cart to a discreet corner, out of the direct line of sight of the security desk. He opened a small, dented metal locker on the side of the cart where he kept his personal items. He bypassed his water bottle and his worn copy of The Little Prince, and his hand closed around a small plastic bottle of bubble solution and a simple plastic wand. It was Lily's. She had insisted he take it to work one day. Just in case of a bubble emergency, Daddy. He'd laughed then, but had tucked it into his locker and forgotten about it. Until now. He walked slowly, calmly, not towards Zoe, but into a space a few feet away from her. He didn't say a word. He just knelt, his work-worn knees creaking in protest. He unscrewed the cap, dipped the wand into the solution, and brought it to his lips. He took a slow, steady breath and blew. A single perfect sphere floated out. It caught the cold light from the ceiling and fractured it into a shimmering, silent rainbow. It drifted on the carefully controlled air currents of the lobby, a fragile jewel of impossible colors. It floated past the scowling security guard, over the head of a woman texting on her phone, and began its gentle descent towards the small, sobbing heap on the floor. Zoe, in a brief pause between sobs, caught the movement. Her wail hitched. Her eyes, red and swollen, focused on the iridescent orb. The bubble landed on the marble floor and vanished with a soft, inaudible pop. Jose blew another. This time, a cluster of them emerged. They tumbled through the air, silent and magical. One was big and wobbly, another a chain of 3 smaller ones. They were completely out of place in this temple of commerce, a touch of whimsical chaos in a world of rigid order. Zoe's sobs subsided into hiccuping breaths. She slowly uncurled, pushing herself up to sit. Her gaze followed the bubbles, her small face a mask of rapt attention. The nanny, Patricia, looked at Jose, her expression of shock melting into disbelief and then profound gratitude. The security guards lowered their hands from their belts. The whispers around the lobby died down. Jose blew more and more bubbles, creating a gentle floating galaxy around the little girl. He didn't look at her directly, didn't try to engage. He just created a safe, quiet space for her. A world made of shimmering, temporary spheres. He was offering a distraction, a moment of silent wonder that asked nothing of her. Zoe finally got to her knees. She reached out a tentative hand, her fingers just brushing a bubble before it vanished. A tiny, watery giggle escaped her lips. It was the most beautiful sound Jose had ever heard in that lobby. Up on the mezzanine, Catalina Ellington pressed her hand against the cold glass, tears blurring her vision. She had the best child psychologists on her payroll. She had sensory rooms filled with expensive equipment. She had a staff trained to handle Zoe's episodes. And a janitor, a man she had never even noticed before, had just accomplished what all her resources often failed to do. He hadn't managed Zoe. He hadn't controlled her. He had connected with her. He had seen a child in pain and offered her a moment of quiet beauty, expecting absolutely nothing in return. And in that moment, the billionaire CEO realized she was looking at a kind of power her money could never buy. The silence that followed the last vanishing bubble was thick with unspoken emotion. Zoe, now calm, allowed Patricia to help her to her feet. Her small hand clutched the nanny's, her eyes still scanning the air as if searching for the last vestiges of magic. She glanced over at Jose, who was quietly screwing the cap back on the little plastic bottle. She didn't smile, but her expression held a quiet, solemn curiosity. For a moment, her gaze met Jose's, and he gave her a small, gentle nod before turning to retrieve his cart. He wasn't looking for thanks or attention. His only goal had been to quell the storm. As he began to walk away, Patricia rushed over, her own composure finally returning. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I I don't know what to say. You were amazing. How did you know to do that?" Jose offered a weary but warm smile. "I have an 8-year-old daughter," he said, as if that explained everything. "Sometimes the world just gets a little too loud for them. I'm glad she's okay." He turned to leave, intent on finishing his shift and getting home to Lily. "Wait, what's your name?" Patricia called after him. Jose Miller." Upstairs, Catalina Ellington was already on the phone to her head of security, her voice low and firm, stripped of all emotion. "Get me the full employment file on an employee named Jose Miller. Janitorial staff, night shift. I want everything you have on him. Personnel records, background check, next of kin, on my desk in 5 minutes." She hung up and paced the length of her office, the city lights of Boston twinkling below like a carpet of scattered diamonds. Her mind, usually occupied with market projections and competitor analysis, was replaying the scene in the lobby over and over. The cold judgment of the onlookers, the helplessness of her own staff, and the quiet, unassuming competence of the janitor. He hadn't seen the daughter of a billionaire. He had seen a child. Brent Holloway, her ambitious executive vice president, entered her office without knocking, a smug look on his face. "Catalina, I just heard about the little scene in the lobby. I've already spoken to security. I recommended we terminate the janitor's contract immediately. A complete breach of protocol? Interacting with a dependent of a senior executive like that? The liability is staggering." Catalina stopped pacing and fixed Brent with an icy stare. Brent was everything she valued in an executive: ruthless, efficient, and completely devoted to the bottom line. He was also a man who saw people as assets or liabilities, with no room in between. "The janitor," Catalina said, her voice dangerously quiet, "is the only person in this entire building who handled that situation correctly. He showed more initiative and emotional intelligence in those 3 minutes than I've seen from our entire HR department in a year." Brent was taken aback. "Catalina, with all due respect, he was blowing bubbles. It was unprofessional. He's a cleaner." "He calmed my daughter, Brent," she cut him off, the steel in her voice making him flinch. "Which is more than anyone else, including myself, was able to do. That will be all." Chastened, Brent retreated from her office, muttering about standards and professionalism. Catalina ignored him. The file on Jose Miller arrived moments later. She read it intently. 42 years old, widower, one daughter, Lily Miller, age 8, a spotless work record, former forklift operator at a warehouse that went bankrupt, no criminal record, just an ordinary man, dealt a tough hand, doing his best to get by. She looked at the grainy photo on his ID badge, a man with tired eyes but a kind set to his mouth. An idea began to form in her mind, an idea so unorthodox it bordered on reckless. For years she had tried to solve the problem of Zoe with money and expertise. She hired the best tutors, the best therapists, the best nannies. They were all highly qualified, but they were all in their own way, like Brent. They saw Zoe as a project, a series of behavioral patterns to be managed. Jose Miller had seen her as a person. She buzzed her assistant, "Get Jose Miller up here and find out where his shift supervisor is. I want him to know Mr. Miller is not in any trouble." 20 minutes later, Jose stood awkwardly in the doorway of Catalina Ellington's office. The room was larger than his entire apartment. One wall was a seamless pane of glass offering a God's eye view of the city. He clutched his worn baseball cap in his hands, his janitor's uniform suddenly feeling coarse and ill-fitting. His supervisor, a gruff but fair man named George, had pulled him aside with a bewildered look. "The CEO wants to see you, and no, I don't know why. Just don't touch anything." Catalina stood by the window, her back to him. She was an imposing figure even in silhouette. When she turned, her face was unreadable. "Mr. Miller, thank you for coming. I am Catalina Ellington." "Ma'am," Jose mumbled, his throat dry. He was preparing to be fired. Maybe the bubble solution had stained the marble. "My daughter Zoe, the little girl in the lobby, she began, her voice softer than he expected. She's, Catalina paused, searching for the right word. She's sensitive to her environment, prone to anxiety. What you did down there, it was remarkable. Jose shuffled his feet. I saw she was scared. I'm sorry if I overstepped, ma'am. Overstepped? Catalina gave a short, humorless laugh. Mr. Miller, you stepped in where everyone else was stepping back. I wanted to thank you, and I wanted to make you an offer. This was it. A bonus, maybe? A gift card. He could really use that. I have a team of people who look after Zoe, Catalina continued, walking slowly towards her large mahogany desk. Nannies, tutors, therapists. But I've come to realize she doesn't need another expert. She needs a friend, someone patient, someone who thinks to carry bubbles for emergencies. She stopped in front of him, her gaze direct and piercing. I want to offer you a job. The official title would be Childhood Development Associate, a role on my personal staff. Your responsibility would be Zoe, to be with her when she's not in school, to help her navigate a world she often finds overwhelming, to be a calm presence. The salary would be $150,000 a year, full benefits, and a company car. Jose's brain simply stopped working. He stared at her, certain this was some kind of elaborate prank or a misunderstanding. $150,000? He currently made $32,000. A company car? He took the bus. Ma'am, he stammered, I'm a janitor. I don't know anything about childhood development. You know how to be kind, Mr. Miller. You know how to be patient. You're a father. From your file, I can see you're a good one. That's a qualification I can't find on any resume, Catalina said, her tone leaving no room for argument. The money is irrelevant to me. My daughter's well-being is not. The position is yours if you want it. Jose thought of Lily. He thought of the constant worry about bills, the cheap brand of macaroni they had to buy, the second-hand coat he'd gotten her for winter. This money, and it wouldn't just change his life. It would change hers. It was a lifeline he never dreamed existed. But it felt wrong, like he hadn't earned it. Why me? He asked, the question genuine. Catalina's mask of corporate control softened for just a fraction of a second. A flicker of the terrified mother she'd been an hour ago appeared in her eyes. Because when my daughter was drowning, she said, her voice barely a whisper, you didn't just stand on the shore and watch. You blew her a rainbow to follow. Please, consider it. The first day of Jose Miller's new life felt like waking up in someone else's dream. He stood in front of his closet, staring at the row of identical blue work shirts next to the single, slightly too tight suit he'd bought for his wedding and worn to Sarah's funeral. Neither seemed appropriate. A package had arrived by courier the previous evening, containing several sets of new clothes, smart trousers, soft cashmere sweaters, and a stylish but understated jacket. A note in a crisp envelope simply read, a provisional wardrobe. We can arrange for a proper fitting later. C. Ellington. It felt more like a costume than clothing. Lily had been ecstatic. Daddy, you're going to be a kid helper for the bubble girl? And we can buy the big box of crayons? The one with the sharpener? Her innocent excitement was the anchor that kept Jose from being swept away by the sheer absurdity of it all. For her, he would wear the cashmere. For her, he would walk into this strange new world. The company car, a sleek black sedan, was waiting for him. A driver held the door open, calling him Mr. Miller. The drive to the Ellington estate in the wealthy suburb of Brookline was a journey through a world he'd only ever seen in magazines. Manicured lawns rolled away from iron gates, and houses, no, mansions, stood like silent, imposing sentinels. The Ellington residence was a modern architectural marvel of glass, steel, and stone, overlooking a private lake. It was beautiful and, like the lobby of the tower, breathtakingly sterile. Patricia, the nanny, greeted him at the door with a warm, relieved smile. Jose, I'm so glad you accepted, she said, leading him through a hall adorned with abstract art. Mrs. Ellington is on a conference call. Zoe is in the sensory room. The sensory room was a child's wonderland, equipped with fiber optic light sprays, a ball pit, a swing, and textured walls. Zoe was sitting in the middle of the floor, meticulously arranging a set of wooden blocks. She looked up as he entered, her dark eyes wide and assessing. She didn't speak. Jose felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. The bubble trick had been a one-off, a fluke. What was he supposed to do now? He didn't have a lesson plan or a therapeutic strategy. He was just Jose. So he did what he knew. He didn't rush toward her or bombard her with questions. He simply sat down on the floor a few feet away, leaning his back against a soft wall panel. He didn't look at her, but instead pulled a small, worn paperback from his new jacket pocket. The Little Prince. He just sat there quietly, letting her get used to his presence. After 10 silent minutes, Zoe spoke, her voice a tiny whisper. "Are you the bubble man?" Jose smiled, not looking up from his book. "I am, but I'm all out of bubbles today." "Oh," she said, a note of disappointment in her voice. "But," Jose continued, "I know how to make a pillow fort. A really good one. The kind a prince could live in." A flicker of interest. "A prince?" "Of course," Jose said, finally turning to look at her. "All the best forts are for royalty." For the next hour, they built the most magnificent fort the sensory room had ever seen, using cushions, blankets, and chairs. Inside, with the fiber optic lights twinkling like stars above them, Zoe started to talk. She told him about her favorite planet, Jupiter, her fear of loud noises, and how she missed her daddy, who was with the real stars now. Jose listened, sharing that he missed his wife, Sarah, too. He told her about Lily, about their Sunday morning pancake tradition. He wasn't a childhood development associate. He was just a dad, talking to a little girl. And it was working. Catalina watched them from a monitor in her home office, a lump forming in her throat. She saw her daughter laughing, saw her engaging in a way she rarely did with the string of professionals who paraded through their lives. For the first time in a long time, Catalina felt a sliver of hope. The weeks that followed settled into a strange new rhythm. Jose would spend his days with Zoe, discovering the simple things that brought her joy, walking by the lake to feed the ducks, drawing comic books where a superhero named Bubble Girl saved the world with kindness, or just sitting quietly and reading together. He was a calming island in her often turbulent sea, but his presence was a disruption to the established order. This was most apparent whenever he had to go to the Ellington Innovations Tower for meetings with Catalina and Zoe's team of therapists. There he inevitably ran into Brent Holloway. Brent made his disdain for Jose clear from the start. He'd accidentally bump into him in the hallway, sneering, "Watch the suit, Miller. It costs more than your monthly rent, or at least it used to." He referred to him in meetings as the nanny, deliberately undermining his new role. One afternoon, Jose was waiting outside Catalina's office while she finished a call. Brent strode past, a Bluetooth earpiece in his ear, deep in a heated conversation. "No, the numbers are solid," Brent said, his voice low and tense. "The Project Chimera projections are locked. She trusts the data. As long as the initial investment clears next week, we're golden. Just make sure the Cayman's account is ready for the transfer. She'll never look twice at the subsidiary reports." Brent glanced up, saw Jose, and his eyes narrowed. He abruptly ended the call. "Something you need, Miller? Or are you just enjoying the view from a floor you're no longer mopping?" Jose ignored the jibe. The words Cayman's account and transfer had snagged in his mind. It sounded shady. He'd heard enough guys at his old warehouse job talk about creative accounting to recognize the tone. But it was none of his business. He was here for Zoe, not to meddle in the affairs of a billion-dollar corporation. Still, a seed of unease was planted. He saw how Brent operated, all charm and ruthless ambition with Catalina, but dismissive and cruel to everyone below him. Jose had learned a long time ago that you could judge a person's character by how they treated those they didn't need to impress. And by that measure, Brent Holloway was a man with no character at all. Jose pushed the thought aside as Catalina's office door opened. His job was to build forts and calm storms, to protect one little girl in her gilded cage. But he couldn't shake the feeling that a much larger storm was brewing, one that threatened to destroy the very foundations of the world he had just entered. Life in the Ellington household was a paradox. In the quiet world he shared with Zoe, Jose felt more at home than he had in years. He wasn't just an employee. He was becoming a friend, a confidant. He helped Zoe navigate the social minefield of a classmate's birthday party. He taught her how to skip stones across the private lake. And in return, Zoe's quiet wisdom and unique view of the world reminded him of the wonder he sometimes forgot to see. He even brought Lily over one weekend, and the two girls from two vastly different worlds bonded instantly over a shared love for drawing and a mutual belief that pillow forts should always have a secret escape hatch. Watching them play, Catalina felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with her perfectly climate-controlled home. She found herself making excuses to leave meetings early, just to be home for the comic book drawing sessions. She and Jose began to talk, not as boss and employee, but as two single parents, sharing stories of their late spouses, their fears for their children, and the crushing loneliness that sometimes crept in after the kids were asleep. For the first time since her husband's death, Catalina was connecting with someone who didn't want something from her. Jose didn't care about her money or her power. He cared that she was struggling to be a good mom, just like he was struggling to be a good dad. But outside this bubble of domestic peace, the corporate world churned on, and Jose's unease about Brent Holloway grew. It was the little things he noticed. As his role expanded, Catalina began to trust him with more than just Zoe. He would sometimes be asked to sit in a quiet corner of her home office while she took calls, his calming presence helping her focus. He became a piece of the furniture, easily overlooked, and people, especially Brent, became careless. One evening, Catalina was on a video conference and asked Jose to fetch a file from the printer in the main study. On top of the stack was a document that hadn't been meant for him, an executive summary of Project Chimera. Jose's eyes scanned the page. It was a proposed acquisition of a smaller tech firm specializing in AI-driven logistics. The numbers were staggering, but one figure jumped out at him, a line item for consulting and facilitation fees listed at $25 million. Jose was no corporate analyst, but he had managed the razor-thin budget of his own household for years. He knew the value of a dollar. That number seemed inflated, arbitrary. It was a perfectly round number, unlike the other meticulously calculated figures on the page. He put the document in Catalina's file, but the number stuck in his head. A few days later, another piece of the puzzle fell into place. He was in the kitchen of the main house, making hot chocolate for Zoe, when Brent came in, deep in another tense phone call. Thinking the room was empty, he didn't lower his voice. "Look, the price is the price," Brent hissed into his phone. "Tell your people at Omnicorp that if they want the Chimera source code before the merger is announced, the fee is non-negotiable. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to gut Ellington Innovations from the inside. She's so focused on the front-end deal she won't even see the back doors wide open." Brent turned and saw Jose standing by the stove, a milk-splattered whisk in his hand. A flash of panic crossed Brent's face, quickly replaced by a condescending sneer. "Enjoying the domestic life, Miller? Don't you have some finger painting to supervise?" he said, before striding out of the room. But Jose had heard it all. Omnicorp. That was Ellington Innovations' biggest competitor. Sell the source code. Gut the company from the inside. It clicked into place with the horrifying certainty of a deadbolt sliding home. Project Chimera wasn't just an acquisition. It was a Trojan horse. Brent was using the deal as a cover to sell the company's most valuable secrets to their rivals. And that $25 million consulting fee was almost certainly his payoff, laundered through a shell company. The Cayman's account. It all made a sickening kind of sense. Jose felt a cold dread wash over him. He had to tell Catalina. But how? What was his proof? The word of a janitor against her most trusted executive VP? He could picture the scene already. Brent laughing it off, painting Jose as a simple-minded, jealous underling who misunderstood a complex business deal. Brent would twist it, saying Jose was trying to sow discord to solidify his own cushy position. He would be fired, discredited, and cast out of the lives of the two people he had come to care for so deeply. Catalina, a woman trained to trust data and proven track records, would believe Brent. She would have to. He felt trapped. For weeks he wrestled with the knowledge, the secret eating away at him. He became quiet, distant. Catalina noticed the change. "Jose, Is everything all right? She asked one evening as they sat on the patio after the girls were in bed. You seem troubled. He looked at her, at this powerful, brilliant woman who was also vulnerable, who was placing her trust in people who were poised to betray her. He thought of what this would do to her company, to the thousands of employees whose livelihoods depended on its success. And he thought of Lily. He had taken this job to give her a better, more secure life. If he spoke up and was wrong, or if he was right but couldn't prove it, he would lose everything and drag Lily back into a world of uncertainty. But if he stayed silent, he would be complicit in a colossal betrayal that would hurt Catalina, and by extension, Zoe. He remembered something his wife Sarah used to say. Integrity is what you do when no one is watching. Well, he was watching, and what he was about to do would be in the full glare of the spotlight. Catalina, he began, his voice low and steady. We need to talk. It's about Brent Holloway, and I think you're in a lot of trouble. The air on the patio grew cold and still. Catalina's expression, which had been open and concerned, hardened into the impassive mask of a CEO. She had spent 2 decades navigating a world of corporate intrigue, backstabbing, and false rumors. Her instincts for self-preservation were honed to a razor's edge. What about Brent? She asked, her tone clipped and professional. Jose took a deep breath, knowing the next few minutes could detonate his entire life. He laid it all out, simply and clearly. He didn't embellish or speculate. He recounted the overheard phone calls, the mention of the Cayman's account, the conversation about Omnicorp and selling the Chimera source code. He mentioned the $25 million consulting fee on the acquisition summary. He called it janitor's math. It was a number that just didn't feel right, a number designed to be hidden in plain sight. I know how this sounds, Jose concluded, his hands clenched in his lap. It's my word against his. I have no proof, just things I've heard and seen. But my gut tells me he's selling you out, Catalina. Catalina was silent for a long time, her gaze fixed on the dark waters of the lake. Brent Holloway had been with her for 10 years. He had been her late husband's protege. He was ruthless, yes, but he had been instrumental in the company's growth. He was a known quantity. Jose, for all the good he had done for Zoe, was still a relative stranger, a man who had been cleaning her floors just a few months ago. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. Jose, she said finally, her voice measured. Brent is overseeing the single most important acquisition in this company's history. He handles deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. A $25 million fee, while large, isn't unheard of for facilitators in a deal of this complexity. And talk of competitors is constant in our business. Are you absolutely certain you didn't misunderstand? The doubt in her voice was a physical blow. He had expected it, but it still hurt. I know what I heard, he said quietly. He's going to gut your company. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Brent. Need to see you ASAP, urgent security matter. I have to go to the office, she said, standing up abruptly. We will continue this conversation later. Her tone was dismissive. The walls were back up. Jose knew with a sinking heart what was happening. He had made his move, and now the opposing player was making his. When Catalina arrived at the tower, Brent was waiting in her office, his face a mask of grave concern. With him were 2 men from corporate security. Catalina, thank God you're here, Brent started, his voice dripping with false sincerity. Something has come to my attention that I frankly find deeply disturbing. It's about Jose Miller. He slid a thin file across her desk. We do routine secondary checks on all personnel with access to your family. Miller's came back with a flag. It appears he was fired from his previous job at the warehouse. The official reason was redundancy, but a source I have in their HR department told me the real reason was suspicion of petty theft. They could never prove it, but tools and supplies frequently went missing from his section. It was a lie, a complete fabrication, but it was a clever one. A bankrupt company with scattered records would be almost impossible to verify quickly. It gets worse, Brent continued, pressing his advantage. For the past few weeks, Mr. Miller has been asking unusual questions. He's been trying to access financial documents, talking to junior analysts about Project Chimera. I thought it was just idle curiosity, but now I see it in a different light. He paused for dramatic effect. This evening, he approached me with a ludicrous story, accusing me of embezzlement. It was a clumsy, transparent attempt at blackmail, Catalina. He said that if I didn't make it worth his while, he would go to you with these lies and try to poison you against me. He's clearly in over his head, thinks he's hit the jackpot, and is trying to extort money. I'm afraid you've brought a fox into the henhouse. Catalina felt the floor drop out from beneath her. It was a classic he said scenario, but Brent's version was backed by a plausible, though fabricated history of dishonesty. Jose's version was an extraordinary accusation against a trusted senior executive. Every bit of her corporate training told her to trust the man with the 10-year track record, not the man with the mop. I see, she said, her voice dangerously calm. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Brent. I will handle Mr. Miller. When Jose was summoned to the tower an hour later, he knew what was coming. He walked into the same office that had represented a new beginning and saw Brent standing near the window, a triumphant smirk on his face. Catalina was behind her desk, her expression unreadable. Jose, she began, not using his last name, Brent has informed me of your recent inquiries into company finances. He has also shared the details of your conversation with him this evening. He's lying, Jose said simply, his gaze fixed on Catalina, pleading with her to see the truth. He also informed me about the circumstances of your departure from your last job, Catalina continued, her voice cold. Suspicion of theft. Jose felt the blood drain from his face. That's not true. The company went under. I was laid off, along with 200 other people. Of course that's what he'd say, Brent interjected smoothly. Catalina, the man is clearly a manipulative opportunist. He saw a way in through your daughter, and now he's trying to cash out. Catalina looked from Brent's polished, confident face to Jose's earnest, desperate one. Her mind was a battlefield. Her logic and years of experience sided with Brent, but her heart, the part of her that had watched this man calm her daughter with bubbles, screamed that he was telling the truth. She remembered the quiet conversations on the patio, the way he spoke about his late wife with such love and respect. He was not a thief. He was not a blackmailer. But what if she was wrong? What if her loneliness and her gratitude had made her blind? Jose, I'm placing you on paid leave, effective immediately, she said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. You are not to have any contact with me or my daughter until our security team has completed a full investigation. You'll be escorted from the building. It was a death sentence. He had lost. He looked at her one last time, his eyes full of a deep, profound disappointment that had nothing to do with the money or the job. I hope you figure out who he is, Jose said, his voice hoarse, before it's too late. 2 security guards entered the room and stood on either side of him. As they walked him out past the smirking Brent Holloway, Jose felt a crushing sense of failure. He hadn't just lost a job. He felt like he had failed to protect the very people he had grown to care about. The door to Catalina's world had been slammed shut, and he was back on the outside looking in. Jose spent the next 48 hours in a fog of despair. He tried to explain the vacation to Lily, but he couldn't hide the worry etched on his face. He felt foolish and naive. He, a janitor, had tried to take on a corporate shark and had been devoured, just as he should have expected. He replayed the confrontation in his mind, wondering what he could have done differently. But he had no power, no proof, nothing but his own conviction. Meanwhile, at the Ellington estate, Zoe was falling apart. Where's Jose? She asked every hour. When is the bubble man coming back? Patricia the nanny tried her best. The therapists were called in, but the calm, stable center of Zoe's world had vanished. Her anxiety spiked, culminating in a meltdown even more intense than the one in the lobby. Catalina held her sobbing daughter, her heart aching with a mixture of guilt and confusion. Zoe's distress was a visceral, undeniable testament to Jose's importance. It was data her heart understood better than any financial report. That night, unable to sleep, Catalina sat in her silent home office, the file Brent had given her on her desk. She stared at the words, suspicion of petty theft. It felt wrong. It didn't align with the man she had come to know. On a whim, she opened her laptop and did something she hadn't done in years, her own deep dive investigation. She wasn't a CEO delegating a task. She was a hacker again, the way she'd been in college with her late husband when they were just two kids with a dream. She bypassed her own corporate security protocols and started digging into the old warehouse company. As Brent predicted, its records were a mess, but Catalina was relentless. She cross-referenced old employee manifests with social media, tracking down the warehouse's former floor manager, a man now running a hardware store in a different state. It took her an hour to find his number. She called him at 2 a.m. "I know this is an insane call," she started, "but I need to ask you about a former employee, Jose Miller." The man, groggy at first, became instantly alert. "Jose? Salt of the earth, that one. Best worker I ever had. It was a crime when we had to let him go." The man practically held the place together after his wife passed. "Why? Was there ever any suspicion of theft associated with him?" Catalina asked, her heart pounding. The manager laughed, a loud, genuine laugh. "Jose Miller? Steal? Ma'am, Jose once found a wallet with $500 in it in the parking lot and spent his entire lunch break tracking down the owner? No, absolutely not. Whoever told you that is a liar." Catalina hung up the phone, a cold fury rising within her. Brent hadn't just been mistaken. He had deliberately, maliciously lied. He had fabricated evidence to discredit Jose. And if he was willing to lie about that, what else was he lying about? The house of cards began to fall. Her trust in Brent, so carefully constructed over a decade, shattered in an instant. She saw everything in a new light. His smugness, his casual cruelty to subordinates, his insistence on controlling every aspect of Project Chimera. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Now she knew what she was looking for. She wasn't just a CEO, she was a world-class software engineer. She dove into her company's servers, into the encrypted project folders for Chimera. Brent was good at hiding his tracks, but Catalina had designed the system he was using. She knew all its secrets, all its backdoors. It took her 3 hours. At 5:15 a.m., she found it. Buried in a subfolder of a subsidiary company registered in Delaware was a digital trail, an encrypted messaging history between Brent and an executive at Omnicorp. A series of ghost invoices that matched to the dollar the $25 million consulting fee. And the kill shot, a draft of a wire transfer confirmation scheduled to move the money to an account in the Cayman Islands the very next day. The same day the acquisition was set to be finalized by the board. It was all there, the entire treasonous plan. He was going to sell the company's core intellectual property and walk away with a fortune, leaving Ellington Innovations a hollowed-out shell. Jose was right. The janitor's math had been spot on. Catalina leaned back in her chair, the first rays of dawn illuminating her office. She felt no triumph, only a chilling sense of betrayal and a profound wave of shame for ever doubting Jose. She had let the cynical, cold calculus of her corporate world blind her to the simple, honest truth spoken by a good man. She picked up her phone. Her first call was not to her head of security or her legal team. It was to Jose. He answered on the second ring, his voice heavy with sleeplessness. "Hello? Jose? It's Catalina," she said, her own voice thick with emotion. "You were right. You were right about everything. I am so sorry. I need you to come to the tower. There's a board meeting at 9 a.m. to approve the Chimera deal, and I need you to be there when I stop it." The Ellington Innovations boardroom was on the 50th floor, a place of immense power where fortunes were made and futures were decided. It was a room Jose had only ever cleaned in the dead of night. Now he was sitting at the vast, polished table, wearing one of the cashmere sweaters Catalina had bought for him. He felt impossibly out of place next to the stone-faced board members in their bespoke suits. Catalina had insisted he be there, sitting to her right. Brent Holloway entered the room radiating confidence. He was at the pinnacle of his career. The Chimera deal was his masterpiece, the final move that would cement his legacy at the company before he vanished with his millions. He shot Jose a look of pure contempt, a final dismissive sneer for the janitor who had dared to challenge him. He clearly assumed Jose was there to be formally fired and humiliated as an example. "Good morning, everyone," Catalina began, her voice calm and commanding. We are here today to give our final approval on Project Chimera. Brent, would you like to walk us through the final presentation? Brent beamed, striding to the front of the room. He launched into his slick, well-rehearsed speech, full of corporate jargon about synergy, market disruption, and shareholder value. He was captivating, persuasive, and utterly fraudulent. As he spoke, Catalina quietly handed a tablet to the lead board member, a formidable older woman named Ms. Albright. On the screen was a summary of Catalina's findings from the night before. The messages, the invoices, the wire transfer confirmation. Ms. Albright's eyes widened. She passed the tablet to the next member. A silent, damning chain of information made its way around the table. And so, with your approval, Brent concluded, his arms spread wide in a gesture of triumph, we will be poised to dominate the industry for the next decade. The room was silent. The board members were all staring at him, their expressions having morphed from professional interest to cold fury. An impressive presentation, Brent, Catalina said, her voice like a shard of ice. But you left out a few key details. For instance, your personal partnership with Omnicorp, or the $25 million you plan to transfer to your private account in the Caymans tomorrow, or the fact that Project Chimera is nothing but a hollow shell, a vehicle for you to commit industrial espionage and sell this company's soul to our biggest rival. The color drained from Brent's face. He stammered, Catalina, that's an outrageous accusation. This man, he pointed a trembling finger at Jose, has been feeding you lies. No, Ms. Albright said, her voice booming in the silent room. This man has been telling the truth. We've seen the evidence, Holloway. All of it. Security entered the room, the same men who had escorted Jose out 2 days prior. This time they walked towards Brent. His corporate swagger evaporated, replaced by the panicked desperation of a cornered animal. He was escorted out, sputtering threats and denials, the doors closing on his ruined career. The room was quiet for a moment. Catalina turned to the board. The Chimera deal is dead. We will be acquiring a different, more stable company, one I vetted last night. But more importantly, today has revealed a deep flaw in our culture. We've become a company that listens to the loudest voice, not the most honest one. We valued aggression over integrity. We trusted the spreadsheet over our own gut. She looked directly at Jose, her gaze full of respect and a warmth that had nothing to do with business. The person who saved this company wasn't a VP or a top analyst. It was a man who, until recently, cleaned our floors. A man who possesses more integrity in his little finger than Brent Holloway had in his entire body. A man who reminded me that character is the most valuable asset we can ever have. Jose Miller is the unseen variable, the human element that our algorithms can never account for. And he's the kind of person I want to help me build the future of this company. Later that day, Jose stood with Catalina on her private mezzanine, looking down at the lobby where it all began. The afternoon rush was in full swing, but it seemed like a world away. I can't go back to just being Zoe's friend, can I? Jose said quietly. No, Catalina replied, turning to face him. I've created a new position, Director of Corporate Culture and Ethics. I need someone to be the conscience of this company, to ensure we never lose our way again. I need someone who knows the difference between right and wrong, someone who isn't afraid to speak truth to power. I need you, Jose. Jose was speechless. A director? It was beyond anything he could have ever imagined. And Zoe? He asked, his voice soft. Zoe will always need her bubble man, Catalina said, a genuine smile finally reaching her eyes. And I think, she added, her voice dropping slightly, that her mother does too. That weekend, there were no boardrooms or corporate towers. There was only a sunny park. Catalina, Jose, Zoe, and Lily were sitting on a large blanket. The two girls were laughing, chasing after the shimmering rainbow-hued spheres that drifted on the breeze. Jose was blowing the bubbles, but this time Catalina was holding the bottle, ready to refill the wand. They weren't a CEO and her employee. They weren't from two different worlds. They were just two single parents, two families broken by loss, finding a way to build a new foundation together. One built on kindness, integrity, and the simple, profound magic of a bubble. The story of Jose Miller and Catalina Ellington reminds us that a person's worth is not defined by their job title or their bank account, but by the content of their character. In a world that often feels cold and transactional, a simple act of kindness, a moment of shared humanity, can ripple outward, shattering glass ceilings and healing broken hearts. It shows us that true strength isn't found in the boardroom, but in the courage to do the right thing, even when you have everything to lose. Jose didn't just calm a little girl's fears, he saved a company and awakened a mother's heart, proving that the most powerful people are not those with the most money, but those with the most empathy. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of everyday heroes, please take a moment to show your support. Smash that like button, share this video with someone who needs a little dose of hope, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that celebrate the best of the human spirit. Click the notification bell so you never miss an update. What was your favorite part of their story? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching.